Welcome to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages, with your host, Matthew Shipp. This is the podcast for all of those who are involved in the agriculture all the way to the distribution of beverages. And now your host, Matthew Shipp.
Hello and welcome to Harvest to Pour. I'm your host, Matthew Shipp, and today I am here with Ian Goodman, the founder of Goodman Coffee, a specialty coffee shop and roastery in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And Ian has been roasting and sharing his craft since 1996. And I look forward to him sharing a little of his experience with us here today. Welcome to the show, Ian.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let us know a little bit about Goodman Coffee. I know you've got a long history of, you've been roasting since 1996. You've had a couple other successful businesses, and kind of bring us up to speed to where you are today with Goodman Coffee and what has been your drive the entire time.
Yeah, so I started in coffee and working in a coffee shop and small roaster in St. Louis. It's called World of Coffee. They're no longer around. It was not what I would consider a specialty coffee. It was classic, the 80s, early 90s, a lot of flavored coffees and this and that. But the one thing he did make us do was read a book on coffee and tea and learn more about it, which at first I thought was annoying because I was in high school. I was trying to do all my schoolwork, and then I had another book I had to read. But then I got into it and was really just taken with all that went into coffee and tea and as a product and I started realizing sort of the undervalue of the product even at that time. And I spent a few months living in Sumatra and getting to know the culture, the people there, and a lot of coffee. And then just got really taken with the people that grow and process and harvest coffee. And so I really got into it. And then I went in Christmas of 91 and visited a girl I was dating and who lived north of Seattle, and was just really taken back. That was sort of really when the whole specialty coffee thing was getting going in the Pacific Northwest. You know, coffee shops everywhere just popping up. And I was really taken by it as a shop. So I just really got into the culture of, from the customer facing side of teaching customers about coffee and so that whole process is how I got started in doing. And so I came back from that trip and decided that's what I wanted to do. And I've pretty much been in coffee ever since. So I started my first company my senior year in college in 96. Owned that one for just shy of 12 years before selling it. And then I did a few other things. But so I got into all of it as a whole cultural thing on multifacets of what it means in society globally, and then what it can do for society in little, communities like Chattanooga or St. Louis, or how coffee can bring people together. And it's a way of bringing a lot of people from a lot of places together to learn about each other. And so I really got just fascinated by it. So after selling the first company, I did a few other things, but then I just missed coffee. I missed talking with people in different places. I missed all that. And so I went around and started this one in 2016 to just get back into coffee.
Mm-hmm. So you stepped out of it for a while. You stepped out of coffee, you said?
Yeah.
And so what were some of the challenges you faced kind of getting back into coffee and just saying, okay, I want to start this up again? I'm assuming your first business, you said you started as a senior in college, was a coffee shop or coffee roaster as well. Okay. And so once you stepped out of that and stepped back in, did you find anything different or challenging to kind of restart that engine again?
In a lot of ways, it was so much easier this go around. In the mid 90s, especially in the Southeast United States, everything was so brand new. People, a lot of people they'd heard of like coffee shops or latte or cappuccino if they'd traveled, or because they watched Friends, they saw Central Perk, or, but they didn't really have any idea about anything about coffee. And so there was a huge curve of educating the client base on why good coffee matters, why specialty coffee matters, how much more you can get out of, most people had thought of coffee as a very specific, they'd grown up drinking Folgers, Maxwell House, that classic canned coffee taste. It's maybe a little nutty, cardboardy, not very interesting coffee, and bitterness and all that, and helping them understand. And it was cheap. It was a cheap commodity, why it in the 90s, why it's worth paying $9, $10 for a pound of coffee over $1.49 or $2.25 at the grocery store. So there was an education process that was much, much harder, to get people. And I mean, even the number of times where I'd have people come in and look at it and bring back the cappuccino and tell me it just doesn't taste anything like the one they get at the gas station, where they push the little button and the powder mixes with the water and, and so that was hard and took time and to build up. This go around, everybody, we have a pretty solid coffee culture here in Chattanooga now. I was the first roaster and the first specialty coffee shop in Chattanooga. But now we have 16 or 17 roasters and, lots of coffee shops, and, good specialty coffee is just part of everybody, daily now. That made it a lot easier than this go around. And the thing that's also probably more fun for me is then I've seen since the 90s, the quality of the green coffee that we're getting from countries is exponentially better than it was back then. There were a lot of good coffees, but the stuff, the advancements in processing and fermentation and, has advanced so far in 25 years that just the stuff we're getting now is so much more fun and so much more interesting than it was 25 years ago.
So with it, as I said, 16 to 17 new roasters in Chattanooga alone, stepping into that, even you are the first specialty roaster in Chattanooga. What doors has that opened, and what challenges are you facing now with, not necessarily competition, but just, is differentiating yourself?
One thing that did make it easier is the fact that in our town, I was fairly well known because I had built up a lot of the coffee culture in Chattanooga of helping people see and understand. So it made it easier for me to get into the pool because of people already knew me, the coffee, and, so that made it easier than just trying to start one in that kind of environment fully from scratch, that no one knew who I was.
I'm guessing you really, starting from 96, had to really learn the do's and don'ts behind roasting and how it's changed over time. Did you find yourself in a teaching role a lot?
Yeah, I get asked a lot of questions, and I help a lot of people. I do more of on the cafe startup. I'm always happy to talk with people about, roasting or whatever, but I would say I get more questions about starting shops and help on that front.
We'll probably get into some of that in this interview as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take us into kind of the meat of the interview, is what I like to call the harvest to pour journey. And the harvest to pour journey is your harvest, where you're sourcing your ingredients, how you take those ingredients and make them uniquely Goodman. And the pour is sort of the marketing, how you people know about you. You talk about education. I think that you even mentioned there was something we're going to talk about your documentary. But you said, you mentioned in that is honoring every piece of the story. And I want you to go into that a little bit as well. So let's go back to the harvest. You are a single source roaster. I don't think you do blends, do you?
We make blends for people, but most everything. And we do the occasional seasonal blend of fun things, but most of what we do is highlighting the single origin, the work of the farmer put into that coffee.
Okay, yeah. So take us back to that. You're sourcing from a lot of different farms at this point, for single origin. And what are you looking for, and why are you sourcing what you're sourcing?
Well, I look at what I'm buying, what I'm sourcing in two different ways. I try to keep a selection of coffees that are, I consider, like, very approachable specialty coffees. They're not wild, too different, because there's still a lot of people that are new to all of different stuff, and the flavor profiles in coffee have expanded so much in the last that you can have a lot of coffees that just don't taste what people think a coffee should taste like, and so I try to keep some that are in that starter specialty coffee. They're really solid coffees, but they're a little bit more classic in what they taste. So I try to keep a handful of those. It also helps with price point for wholesale, but then it helps enable you to get in with somebody who, if they first try something that is very bright and, extremely fruit forward, some people are like, oh, I don't even understand what I'm drinking, And so then, having coffees that are still really good and really interesting, but aren't such a shock to the palate for what those people are used to, that I'm able to then, show them this and then slowly work them into understanding differences in profiles and flavors and the effects that have on the, on the farm and what they're doing and how that makes the coffee ultimately change in taste. So we do a lot of that. And then I'm also looking for fun coffees that I find fun and exciting, that push the boundaries of what we expect in coffee flavor profile. Colombia has probably been the most exciting origin for me over the last 10 plus years, where they, in the 90s when I'd buy Colombian coffee, I liked it. It was good, but I considered it one of those starter specialty coffee, the ones that were approachable, drinkable, that, but they had the classic notes. They were very chocolatey, nutty. Mm-hmm. You would have differences from region, but they were differences a coffee taster is going to pick up, but your average consumer is just going to, and that was what the Colombian Federation was trying for. The Federation had such tight controls on what the farmer could do, how they could process, what varietals or cultivars they could grow, because they were trying to create a Colombian taste profile, and then the Federation laxed all that and let the farmers work directly with people like me. And it also opened up that they could grow whatever coffee they wanted and process it however they wanted, which has made Colombia on the forefront of experimental fermentations and pushing the boundaries of what we know coffee can do in that modulation of the flavors from the work on the farm.
Well, it's a great segue into you saying you're able to start working, the roasters are able to start communicating and working with the grower. You've taken this to very much the next level by visiting some of these farms. I think even to the point where you've started to create a documentary around that. Would you like to talk about that some?
Yeah, so our first trip to Colombia was during the pandemic. I think it was 20 or 21, I can't remember. But I took a photo and video guy with us to help just sort of document everything for us to use on our website and social media and stuff like that. And we just started, the more that we filmed and the more we just started realizing that there's a really good story to tell there. And most people, even most avid coffee drinkers, don't really have a good grasp on the amount of work and effort that it takes to produce good coffee. And so we realized that's an important thing to tell, to get people to understand, we look at $25 for a pound of coffee as being very expensive, when in reality, it is based on what we do, it's more expensive, but it is still wildly cheap when you factor in the amount of labor that went into getting me the coffee. And I think most people also, when they think of a coffee as being great, they link it to the roaster. Now, a great coffee that is great, the roaster pulled it out and did a very good job roasting it, but it's only great because of what the farmer did. I can't make the coffee better than the work of the farmer. I can make it worse, but I cannot make it better. all that creation and flavor modulation that happens during processing and fermentation is what creates profile in the coffee. And then I find it is my job to try to pull all that out and not ruin their work, And so I think so we went back a few more times to film and really tell their story, the story of the harvesters, the people in the processing, the farmers, and just show. And it was really fun to see the amount of passion, even with kind of migratory pickers that travel around the country and pick during different things, the amount of pride they had in what they did. And that was, them wanting to share about their family legacy. My grandfather was a picker. My grandfather's grandfather was a picker. I was, and they're very proud of the work that they do. And I mean, I think it's just a fun story. And I think it's one that most people just don't have a good appreciation for unless you've spent a lot of time around the farms to understand what exactly that takes for them and for us.
Yeah, I noticed this other part of the documentary. There was like a family member getting another family member, or maybe another partner family started in the coffee growing. Like they were getting them land, or they were getting them education. They couldn't figure out which one it was.
So so Felipe down in Colombia, and then Lucas and Sophia, who help a lot with our exporting or importing into the U.S., they run a program basically to help young coffee farmers. They had noticed, like in Colombia, the average age of a coffee farmer is right close to 60 years old, and, so they have tried to create programs that help make it easier and exciting for young people to get into the business and look at it and basically create a business, not just someone who just works land and sells it, but tries to create a business. So like in that, so we also try to do a thing where we help small farmers we work with, like once a year, pick one and look at them. Hey, what tools do you need to do a better job? What things do you need to make yourself more financially sustainable, profitable, to keep supplying amazing coffee? And so like with Pablo, we helped build raised beds, a Marquesina for him, so he could dry his own coffee and process rather than just sell the cherry. So we do try to do programs like that, because the more I travel around the world, the more I see a lot of, farmers quitting, like the parents or grandparents are too old. The younger generation doesn't want to get into it because they don't see it as an avenue to actually create any financial stability for them and their family. So they end up either growing something else or getting out altogether. So I really think as a specialty roaster, I think all of us have a responsibility to find a way to make sure they can be successful. Because if they're not successful, we're going to be in a pinch, if a lot get out of it and stop growing coffee.
You might have the homogenization of specialty coffee, which you don't want.
And then it'll just go down, and so, or the stuff that is really good gets wildly expensive because there aren't many people doing it.
Yeah.
So I look at that as just it's a good business decision, because if I can keep the people that grow coffee for me, if I make sure that they're successful, they also help to make sure that I'm successful, because they're supplying me with the product I need. We're working together. It's taking that supply chain and making it more like a supply circle, and each of us knows that we're very tied to the success of the other.
Yeah.
And if one link of that chain is not successful, then it's going to fall apart.
Absolutely. I really like the fact that you're even bringing back your roasted coffee back to them, and them having it for the first time. The coffee they grew, roasted in your way, and trying that for the first time. That seemed really special.
It is. And it's surprising the number of, especially small farmers that we've worked with that have never tasted the product they grow. They basically they sell it in cherry. Some of them maybe dry it and sell it in parchment, but they've never roasted it or tried it or drank what they grow. And I think, and being able to share their product with them and our excitement and our appreciation for the work that they do, it means a lot to them. And it also helps them drive to continue to be successful, because they realize the people on the other side of the chain actually really care about what they do and how they do it. And so that's fun to watch that sort of open their eyes of going, oh, them seeing their name printed on a bag, them seeing, and it just changes their perspective a lot.
Very much appreciating each other's craft.
Right.
And going into your craft, you're roasting, you're making, you're differentiating yourself between other roasters. So what do you see that's different about Goodman Coffee, the roasting you do? You think you've told a little bit of the story, but how is it uniquely yours?
We try a lot to make sure that, that's a good question. And it's hard to say exactly, but we do a lot to make sure that the coffee, when we roast the coffee, that we're really highlighting the work of the farm. I don't like the idea of of roasting to a roast level. Like we have, this coffee is a dark coffee, this coffee is a medium coffee. We try to develop a roast profile that really brings out the work of what they did, and lots of people, that's not unique to us. Lots of roasters that do that, but it is what makes us, that we try to do. And that's an important part for us, of making sure that the work of the farmer is highlighted, so yeah.
Okay. I mean, speaking from my experience, I just had your Costa Rican, but it was just the amount of flavor and aroma that comes from the coffee you roasted was just almost surprising to me. Usually I have to have that cup up to my mouth and nose to start appreciating it. I was holding it down below me, and it was just hitting me in the face of, wow, There's a lot going on here. You really kind of highlighted, well, you said the farm, but I would say even the flavor or even the aroma, you're really bringing that forward.
Yeah, and that's really what we try to do. And in understanding the science in roasting of what you're doing to a coffee, because you're basically creating chemicals, acids that are formed during the roasting process, that are then broken. Some are broken down, some are, but basically understanding how you can do the best for that coffee to highlight all those things and make those things really jump and shine, and not break them down.
Absolutely. And I want to segue into the pour. Now, you were talking about the documentary. You brought up something, and you also said, you were roasting coffee at different levels for different approachabilities and different familiarities for your customers. And I want to also talk about, what's attracting them to you, what's making them come back. But you did say one thing in the documentary that I just hung on this, is you were mentioning that most people won't bat an eye at paying $50 or $60 for a bottle of bourbon. Right. How do we get coffee to be recognized, maybe not at $60 a bag, but recognized at that level where people aren't worried about the price so much as what they're getting from it?
Well, I think part of that comes through in how you sort of modulate that taste profile during the roasting. It's, and now the flavor notes can be so much more explosive than they used to be, to where it is easier, back in the late 90s, you would get, Ethiopian coffees were the ones that were, Ethiopia and Yemen were probably my two favorite back then, because they were the ones that you could easily pick up flavor notes that were wildly different. And now I think most people, a lot of people of average coffee consumers still have in their head of the way coffee is a singular, like there's differences, but I can't really taste the differences. I'm not a coffee taster, they all taste like coffee to me. And while that was more true 25 years ago than it is now, a lot of people just haven't been exposed to the world of flavor profiles in coffee. So now we're able to do that much easier, and you can get these coffees like that Costa Rica or some of these other wild ones we have of, that it's impossible not to notice those huge flavors. And even someone who's not a big taster can go, oh, I totally taste black cherry. I totally taste blueberry. I totally see what you mean by the orange, the citrus or the floral or the flavors are so much easier or to pull out that I think the more that we can get people to see that and understand, then it's easier for them to go, oh, this is a special profile. This is this coffee is really unique. Maybe not a coffee you think of as a daily drinker, but a really fun, interesting coffee that is truly special,
Yeah.
And I think the more that people see that and they can taste those differences for themselves, it becomes easier and easier for them to spend more money on something than they used to. And then we've had plenty of coffees like auction lots from Yemen, that we've sold, $40 for 4 ounces of coffee.
Wow.
And people being willing to buy them and taste them and get excited about them.
So what gets people in the door initially to either turn them into these specialty appreciated people who really appreciate this specialty coffee to come back or get them educated in the first place? So what do you believe is kind of your ethos behind getting them in? Because of course you can make the coolest coffee in the world, but if you're not selling the coffee, you're not going to be around long.
Right. So I think the way that I try to approach that is why I have a broad spectrum of coffees that we offer. So we have plenty of coffees that someone can come in and go, oh, this is a really nice coffee. To me, it might be a little bit more simplistic or basic, but it's a really solid, coffee from Mexico or really solid Guatemalan coffee that has nice notes, but it is approachable and it has a lot of the classic stuff that people think of. And then, in the shops, we are brewing different coffees on bar every day for drip batch brews. And we have, and that gives people the opportunity to try things that they maybe never would try, and then get them to start expanding what they think of as coffee. And that has worked very well. And because it's, if somebody that isn't really versed in a lot of the differences in coffee comes in and we've got a wild anaerobic coffee and that's all that they try, that might just be too much for them, or so far from what in their mind, so far from what coffee should be that they just can't get their head around it right away. So, being able to start them off slow and expose them to different things and create that trust in them with us that, we can help guide them and find coffees that fit with what they like and then get them to try all the different cool, fun, different things.
And then you mentioned the cafe front side. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. What does it take to be a successful coffee shop and specialty roaster and balancing both the front end, the coffee shop, and the back end, the roastery? And I mean, I've heard from other people, sometimes staffing is an issue, sometimes getting the right people in, keeping this consistency. What do you believe, since you've done this twice successfully, in your mind, is what it takes to be successful as a coffee shop front and roastery back?
Yeah. A lot. I mean, training with the staff is important, but also creating an environment where people want to stay. So we've been pretty blessed in that I have a really strong crew. And I think of all of my employees, I think currently the shortest amount of time that one of them has been with me is a year right now.
Okay.
So, creating sort of that, you become like a little work family, and creating an environment where your employees are excited about what they're doing. I've taken employees on origin trips with me, get them to where they're thinking of where they're excited about what they're selling and why they're selling it, and get them kind of all in part of it. And then, that kind of thing makes employees stay longer, which helps with, because turnover is an issue. If you have a lot of turnover, you are constantly in training mode, and that adds a whole lot of extra work, So, I think that's the way I've always tried to do it, and it has worked pretty well. It's not perfect, mainly because, I have limits in what I can do, and but having a good staff that's trained, putting people in leadership roles that are good at leading and helping and creating where people get excited about what you're doing. Your staff is excited about the different coffees. They're excited about the different things that are happening, and it makes them feel part of it. And that really helps with the growth.
So do you ever help kind of identify the roles as they come in, like an employee comes in and saying, oh, you might start here at the bar, but I see you moving up, or is it on them, or how do you keep them? Some people are kind of your superstars. They're the ones who want to grow. The other ones are your consistent people who want to do this one thing and do really well at it. How do you differentiate those two and not mix them? Because you could burn one out or bore one on the other hand.
Right. So, a lot there, I put a lot on, I don't make assessments right away on something like that. I basically bring someone in, I train them, I help them, create opportunity for them to do other things and see where they want to go and what they want to do. If, I want to find people who want to move in that direction, who want to learn more, who want to be excited about what they're doing. And it's not just a job while they're in college or even high school or just post college. Because I do realize most of the staff, it's going to be relatively transient. There are very few that are going to look at working for me as a career opportunity, but I have to find ways to make sure that, if they're excited about what they're doing and interested in it, then they will keep at it and want to do a good job. And
all right, great. So speaking of all of these things, what is your biggest open challenge currently you're working through?
One, growth. We've grown a lot in the last 2 years. So right now, one of our biggest challenges is we've outgrown the size of the roaster we have. So I'm looking at buying a bigger roaster, but that's also going to entail a bigger roasting space. So that's probably our biggest challenge at the moment of just trying to figure out how to grow into the next stage and do it in a financially responsible way.
Okay. That's a good one. That's scalability is one of our top ones.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking on that, where do you see taking Goodman Coffee next?
Continue to expand on the roasting and the wholesale. I don't have visions of being a big coffee chain. I think you can have multiple outlets and locations and not lose, the specialty touch. But there's a line there where you get too big and it's too hard to have control. And you've seen that with some really great roasters that have gotten big. The quality, goes down a little bit. They're not quite as exciting as they used to be. So finding that balance of making sure that we don't grow too much that it affects the quality. So, but I within the next 5 years, I'd like to have 1 or 2 other locations and then a bigger roasting facility.
And what are, as you're growing into this, I'm sure you're definitely very aware of these, but what trends are you seeing in coffee industry right now as far as what specialty coffee goes?
you're seeing trends in origin, in processing and fermentation. You're seeing a lot more that's spreading to a lot of other locales. That has been a really fun trend. You're seeing different things like different co-fermentations, which can be wild and interesting. And some people don't like that. I find it very interesting and intriguing of what they can do to make unique and fun coffees from different places that make things really exciting. And so that's been a big trend. I think we've seen in the US, there's been a huge uptick in, cold, different cold coffee options that has gotten a lot. There have been in some fun things like at first I was sort of taken back by the idea of specialty instant. But then after looking at, there have been, you can have make a really great instant coffee. And it, maybe not, it's not going to be the same caliber as that exact coffee done on a pour over, but it's really good. And it has a unique fit for when you would use it. Taking some of that camping is a whole lot easier than taking a grinder or, and all the other stuff to make coffee. So it's just, you've seen some advancements of that, of making things, that have been interesting and I think have potential to do some fun and exciting things.
All right, that's great. And since you stepped into coffee in a big way, then you step back out and you step back in. So kind of got to ask, if somebody today wants to step in and start their own coffee shop and roastery, but what kind of advice would you have for them starting now?
Education, learn. Just start when I started roasting in '96, the access to information was very limited. There were a few books out there. Michael Sivitz had an interesting book on coffee technology that went into a lot of the science but now there's the access to information is so much more that I would recommend. Really start to learn. If you really are excited about coffee, start learning about coffee. The saddest thing to me is when I, go into a shop that wants to be a specialty shop but they haven't taken time to learn basics of even, espresso extraction or, brewing and understanding how all those things work to make a good coffee. And, and then you end up with a terrible coffee, and that's a sad thing to me. And that's where I see a lot of people just not become successful, is because it's like, oh, it'd be cool to own a coffee shop. I don't really know anything about coffee, but I like it. So then they open it and then but what they're putting out is terrible, and so I think that's the biggest step. If you want to get into it, learn everything you can about it and do it in such a way that you are representing the coffee well, because it's sad to me to have somebody make a horrible cup of coffee for you and think of, that was an awful lot of work that the farm put in for that one cup of coffee, and the coffee shop kind of ruined, and that's a problem. That's a problem I don't really know how to overcome but even across the board. As being a roaster, I could roast and create the best coffee, the best that coffee could be. And then I could sell it to somebody and they could take it home and, not brew it right. And then it's not, and then all of a sudden that coffee is just at best okay,
Yeah.
And so that's just a hurdle, but that's a smaller hurdle now than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, that is a challenge behind coffee. Is not only has it gone through this journey from the farm to the roastery, but now it's still not done. You still have to, if you're going to take it home, you got to take it home and prepare it for yourself. It's not just something out of a bottle. Cold brew, maybe that's where cold brew is kind of bridging that gap. Like, I can just take it home, put it in the fridge, pour it when I need it.
Right.
But as far as, hot coffee but I think it does apply to a kind of a niche market of like, if you like your gadgets, you're going to like coffee.
Right.
So that there is kind of a double play on that. So there's multiple niche markets within just coffee itself, it seems.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And more so now than there used to be, 20, 25 plus years ago, people that were really into coffee didn't have the tools to do it really well at home, or the tools that you could get to do it really well at home were really quite expensive. But now it's, there are so many options. You're still going to spend some money, but more people are willing to spend the money and buy the little gadgets and pour over sets and gooseneck kettles and scales and, all those things to make the coffee as best as you can do it at home, and that there's a lot more ability to do it now than there used to be. So, yeah.
All right. And so a couple more questions. This one's kind of a fun one. So in Goodman, what is your favorite beverage?
My go-to would be either espresso or a cortado, and then I do a lot of pour overs for just trying coffees and drinking coffee
And when you're just kind of out on the town, not in your coffee shop, do you have a favorite
drink?
Yeah, favorite beverage
outside. I mean, I typically, if I go to some place, especially some place that's new, I usually get an espresso shot and a drip just to see, what they have, how they're doing, what coffees they have. And, you can tell a lot about a shop that way. That's usually my go-to when I'm somewhere else.
All right. So, and then do you have any upcoming promotions or anything going on at Goodman? Where can people find your coffee, get your coffee? And do you have any events you tend to promote as well?
Yeah, we have, goodmancoffee.com on the website. You can order from there, or if you're in the Chattanooga area, we have a couple of locations in Chattanooga. We have we're releasing today, actually, a new set of coffees from Brazil that are wild and crazy. So they're from Vinhal Estates in Brazil. Brazil's been one of those countries that I have looked at for a long time, as Brazil's can be a good blender coffee for people, or they are, or the best examples are a good starter coffee. They are nutty, they're, chocolatey, they're good, but they're baseline. And Rafael is picking that game up a lot. So we have 3 coffees from him that we're releasing. One is, he calls it chocolate hazelnut, and it tastes like you stirred Nutella into the coffee with a little bit of coconut, huge body, just creamy, chocolatey, hazelnutty, coconutty. I mean, it's just a lovely coffee. Great on espresso. Then another coffee, it's a grape starfruit, and it is, grape and starfruit and kiwi and wheat and complex fruit. And the other one is honey propolis that has just super sweet honey-like profile, floral, spicy, with some of the starfruit thrown in there. So the thing that's really fun about that for me is we'll sell them individually, but then we're going to do like a little 3-bag taster set of each of them. But so people can try them and it helps you understand how much of an impact on the final cup profile happens from the farm.
That's great.
And all 3 of them are anaerobic and thermal shock coffees, but done for, anaerobic in different ways. Some are dry, some are have like water in with the anaerobic, then thermal shock, then the anaerobic again, then, so all of them are either 2 rounds of anaerobic and thermal shock. One of them has 3 rounds of anaerobic fermentation and then dried on raised beds. But they're really fun and really unique. And we're also releasing it with pull and pour. So he has it it'll be on his special release today or tomorrow.
All right.
And that
Great.
is, those are fun and exciting. And if someone who's been in specialty coffee for a long time, Brazil's usually not on their radar of an interesting coffee, and these are very interesting coffee, that I'm super excited about and super excited about building that relationship up with Rafael.
It's great to see good things coming out of Brazil. I just also did an interview with a Brazilian family coffee farm, and they seem to be a lot of people picking up on what they're doing. So it's coming out of the scene. That's great. That's great.
Yeah,
to see.
I think they're sort of where Colombia was 15 years ago, and just starting to realize they can do more. And I think realizing that to stay real relevant in the specialty worlds, that they need to kind of kick up their game a little bit. And so farmers like Rafael have been doing that, and now you're starting to see unique and interesting coffees from out of there.
That's good. Good to see. Well, Ian, I really enjoyed this time. You really took us through a great journey from starting from a book they told you had to read on coffee and tea, all the way from the travels you took to starting your own coffee business as a senior in college. That's awesome. That's impressive. And then I guess, being successful with that, stepping away, missing it, coming back and starting Goodman, and then really starting this campaign of really bringing knowledge to what the farmers do, the work behind that goes into the bean, the cherry, and before it even gets to you, and really building that story around the farmer and the roaster to the result you have, great results you have at Goodman. And I look forward to seeing where else this is going. Also, you have a documentary coming out pretty soon.
Hopefully. They're still editing the final, and that takes a long time, and have a small team. Oh, yeah.
All right.
They're still working on editing all that.
All right, we'll keep an eye out for that. And once that goes live, let me know. We'll put that in the show notes as well so people can find it. But yeah, I really appreciate this. There's a lot of learned lessons in here. And thanks for taking time talking about your cafe and how you grow up your staff and what you look for. I usually don't ask those questions, but it just seemed to be the right place to go with this. And I really appreciate your time with that.
Yeah, great talking with you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ian.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages with Matthew Shipp. Check the show notes for our guest contact information and connect with Matthew Shipp on LinkedIn today.